You know what's interesting? I spent 15 years watching people celebrate promotions, new title, better office, maybe a 4% raise if they were lucky. And every single time I'd see the same thing in their eyes, this mixture of pride and exhaustion. Because here's what nobody tells you at graduation. The safest path is often the riskiest one. I'm not talking about some motivational poster nonsense. I'm talking about mathematical reality. Cold, hard numbers that most people don't see until they're 55 and realize they've been running on a treadmill that's been tilted against them the entire time. This isn't a book. It's a rewiring. And if you're listening to this while commuting to a job that pays you just enough to keep showing up but not enough to ever leave, this one's for you. Let's start with a story about the most dangerous word in the English language: secure. Chapter 1: The Myth of Security, or Why Your Stable Job is a House of Cards. Here's a question I ask every new investor I meet. What's riskier, starting a business that might fail or depending entirely on one company that can fire you with 2 weeks' notice? Most people say the business. They're wrong. You see, we've been trained to believe that employment equals security, that a steady paycheck is the foundation of a responsible life. But let me tell you what I learned, watching the 2008 financial crisis from the inside. The people who thought they were safest got hit the hardest. I remember this guy. Let's call him Marcus, senior VP at a regional bank, 22 years with the company, never missed a day, had a mortgage, 2 car payments, and kids in private school. He built his entire life around the assumption that his paycheck was guaranteed. Then, one Friday afternoon, HR called him in. 22 years. Gone in 22 minutes. And you know what the devastating part was? It wasn't just the lost income. It was the mindset. Marcus had spent 2 decades perfecting the skill of being an employee, showing up on time, following protocols, keeping his boss happy. But he'd never developed the skill of creating value independently. He'd never asked himself, if this company disappeared tomorrow, what would I be worth to the marketplace? That's the paycheck addiction. And like any addiction, the real damage isn't what it gives you, it's what it takes away. The math that nobody shows you. Let's talk numbers, real numbers. The median American worker gets a 3% annual raise. Sounds decent, right? Except inflation has been running at 3.7% over the past 5 years. You're not getting ahead. You're losing ground in slow motion. But here's where it gets worse. Let's say you make $75,000 a year. Not bad. After taxes, you're taking home about $56,000. You've got rent or a mortgage, car payment, student loans, groceries, insurance. By the time you pay for existing, you're left with, what? Maybe $500 a month if you're disciplined? At that rate, you'd need 16 years, just to save 1 year's salary. Meanwhile, your time, the only resource you can never get back, is being traded at a fixed rate, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, for the next 40 years. Do the math. That's 80,000 hours of your life, sold, at a price someone else determined. Does that sound familiar? The single point of failure. In investing, there's this concept called concentration risk. It's when too much of your wealth is tied to one asset, one stock, one property, one outcome. Every financial advisor will tell you, diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Yet when it comes to income, most people have 100% of their eggs in one basket. Their employer, one company, one boss, one revenue stream. If you had a portfolio like that, any professional would call you reckless. But we call it having a job. We call it responsible. The 1% don't think this way. They build systems, multiple income streams, assets that generate cash flow whether they show up or not. They understand that real security doesn't come from depending on one source. It comes from creating so much value across multiple channels that no single failure can destroy you. That's not just smart. It's survival. Chapter 2: The Employee Mindset versus the Investor Mindset, the shift that changes everything. I need you to understand something crucial. Your mindset isn't just positive thinking fluff. Your mindset is a filter that determines which opportunities you can even see. Let me show you what I mean. 2 people get a $5,000 bonus at work. Same company, same amount, same Friday afternoon. Person A, the employee mindset, thinks, finally, I can upgrade my car, or maybe that vacation I've been putting off. Person B, the investor mindset, thinks this is seed capital. What can I build with this that will return more than $5,000? Same money, completely different worlds. The survival mode trap. Here's what happens to most people. They get their first real job, and they immediately start maintaining instead of creating. Rent is due, student loans kick in. Maybe they finance a decent car because, hey, they've got steady income now. Before they know it, their entire paycheck is spoken for before it even hits the account. This is what I call the survival mindset. And it's expensive. Because once you're in survival mode, every financial decision becomes about managing scarcity. How do I stretch this paycheck? How do I afford this unexpected expense? How do I keep all these plates spinning? You're not thinking about growth. You're thinking about not falling behind. And here's the cruel irony. The harder you work in survival mode, the deeper you get into it. Because you're too exhausted to think strategically, too stressed to take calculated risks, too dependent on that next paycheck to ever question the system. I've watched this play out hundreds of times. Smart, capable people trapped in a cycle of working harder and harder just to stay in place. The creation mindset, flipping the script. Now let's talk about the other side. The investor mindset starts with a fundamentally different question. Not, how can I pay my bills? But how can I create value that compounds? See, employees trade time for money. 1 hour equals 1 unit of pay. It's linear. It's capped. There are only 24 hours in a day, and you need to sleep for 8 of them. But investors? Investors build leverage. They create systems, businesses, rental properties, investment portfolios, digital products that generate returns without requiring their constant presence. They trade effort once and get paid repeatedly. Let me give you a concrete example. A few years ago, I bought a duplex for $180,000, put down $36,000, 20%, financed the rest, rented out both units for a combined $2,400 a month. My mortgage, taxes, and insurance, about $300, that's $1,800 a month, $13,200 a year from one decision. Now, here's the beautiful part. That property doesn't care if I'm sleeping, doesn't care if I'm on vacation. It just performs. Month after month, year after year. That's system-based income. And once you have enough of these systems running, you stop trading time for money entirely. You've made the shift. Identity is everything. But here's what most people miss. You can't build an investor's life with an employee's identity, because identity drives behavior. If you see yourself as someone who needs a job to survive, you'll make decisions that reinforce that dependency. You'll avoid risk. You'll seek permission. You'll wait for someone else to validate your worth with a salary offer. But if you see yourself as someone who creates value and solves problems, someone who builds assets and systems, then every decision changes. You don't ask, can I afford this? You ask, how can I create this? You don't think, I need a raise. You think, what can I build that the market will pay for? This isn't motivational theory. This is identity alignment, and it's the foundation of every wealth-building journey I've ever witnessed. You cannot live a life that doesn't match the way you see yourself. So who are you, an employee waiting for permission or an investor creating opportunities? Chapter 3. The High Cost of Emotion. Why most people stay broke. Let me tell you about the most expensive day of my investing career. March 2020. COVID crashes the market. The S&P 500 drops 34% in 5 weeks. Every alert on my phone is red. My portfolio, built over a decade, is bleeding value by the hour. And I'm sitting there, staring at the screen, feeling my chest tighten. Every instinct in my body is screaming, sell, protect what's left, get out before it gets worse. You know what I did? Nothing. Not because I'm brave. Because I'd trained myself for exactly that moment. See, the 1% don't win because they're smarter. They win because they've mastered themselves. They've learned to separate emotion from execution. And in a world where most people make financial decisions based on fear or greed, that's the ultimate edge. The pause that pays. Here's a principle that saved me more money than any investment strategy. The 10-second pause. Before every major financial decision, buying, selling, committing, I stop. I breathe, I create space between the impulse and the action. Because here's what I know. Emotional decisions are expensive. Panic sells at the bottom. Greed buys at the top. Impatience abandons good investments right before they pay off. Calm decisions are profitable. That 10-second pause gives your rational brain time to catch up with your emotional brain. It lets you ask, am I responding to reality or am I reacting to fear? Most people skip this step. They feel something and immediately do something, and that's how people lose money. The detachment principle. There's another piece to this. You have to separate who you are from what you own. I've seen people destroy themselves financially because they tied their self-worth to their net worth. When their investments went up, they felt like winners. When their investments went down, they felt like failures. That's dangerous. Because when your identity is attached to your portfolio, you can't take calculated risks. You can't lose without feeling like you're the loss. But when you detach, when you see money as a tool, not a scoreboard, everything changes. You can take that calculated risk on a business idea. You can weather a market downturn without panicking. You can build wealth systematically instead of emotionally. This is emotional control, and it's not optional. It's the foundation. Chapter 4. Discipline is the architecture, building systems that compound. You want to know the difference between people who wish they were wealthy and people who are wealthy? Consistency, not intensity, not excitement, not some brilliant idea they had at 3 a.m. Consistency. I know that sounds boring. It is boring, but boring is what builds wealth. The pay yourself. First rule. Let me give you the simplest, most powerful financial habit I know. Pay yourself first. Here's what that means. The moment your paycheck hits your account, before you pay rent, before you buy groceries, before you do anything, 10% goes straight into savings or investments, automated, non-negotiable. Treat it like a bill you can't skip. Because here's the truth. If you wait until the end of the month to see what's left over, there will never be anything left. Expenses expand to fill income, always. But when you pay yourself first, you force yourself to live on the remaining 90%. And you know what? You adjust, you find efficiencies, you cut waste, and that 10%? It compounds. Let's say you make $60,000 a year. That's $6,000 saved annually. Over 30 years at a conservative 7% return, that becomes $566,000 from discipline, from one automated decision. The weekly review ritual. Here's another non-negotiable, the weekly financial review. Every Sunday morning, I spend 10 minutes reviewing 3 things. Where did money go this week? Not judgment. Just awareness. What's one financial decision I made well? Reinforcement. What's one adjustment I need to make? Course correction. 10 minutes, that's it. But those 10 minutes keep me aware. And you cannot improve what you don't measure. Most people avoid looking at their finances because it's uncomfortable. But discomfort is just information. It's telling you where the gaps are. The 1% seek that information. They track, they measure, they adjust. And over time, those small course corrections add up to massive results. Choose long-term comfort. Here's the hard part. Discipline means choosing long-term security over short-term pleasure. That's it. That's the whole game. You want the new phone, the weekend trip, the dinner out? Fine. But not at the expense of your future. Because the comfort built on debt fades fast. The comfort built on preparation? That lasts. Every time you choose the disciplined path, you're building a version of yourself who has options, who has freedom, who doesn't have to take the first job offer or stay in a bad situation because the bills are due. Discipline isn't restriction, it's alignment, it's freedom. Chapter 5. The Investor. Shift from paycheck to portfolio. All right, this is where it all comes together. Everything we've talked about, the mindset, the emotional control, the discipline, it's all leading here to the shift from employee to investor, from linear income to leveraged income. This is the move that changes everything. Your paycheck is seed capital, First, you need to reframe what that paycheck actually is. Most people see their paycheck as the goal. They work, they get paid, they spend, repeat. But the 1%, they see their paycheck as starting capital. It's the resource they use to build something bigger. Let me break this down with numbers. Let's say you make $70,000 a year. After taxes, call it $52,000 take home. If you save 15%, $7,800 annually, and invest it in an S&P 500 index fund averaging 10% annual returns, here's what happens. Year 10, $135,000. Year 20, $486,000. Year 30, $1.4 million. You didn't get lucky. You didn't time the market. You just consistently redirected a portion of your paycheck into an asset that compounds. That's the shift. Your job isn't your wealth. It's the tool you use to build wealth. Assets versus liabilities. The only rule that matters. Here's the definition that changed my life. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. That's it. Forget the accounting textbooks. It's that simple. Your primary residence, if it's not generating rental income, it's a liability. Your car? Liability. That boat you financed? Massive liability. But a rental property that cash flows $400 a month? Asset? A dividend-paying stock? Asset? An online course you built once and sell on autopilot? Asset. The 1% spend their time acquiring assets. Everyone else spends their time maintaining liabilities. And here's the compounding effect. Every asset you build frees up your time to build more assets. It's exponential. System-based income. The end game. Let me paint the picture of what's possible. Right now, you probably trade time for money. You work 40 hours, you get paid for 40 hours. Miss a week, lose a week's pay. But what if you had systems that generated income without your direct involvement? Rental properties managed by a property manager, dividend stocks that pay quarterly. A digital product, course template software, that sells while you sleep. A business with employees handling operations. This is system-based income. And once you have enough of these systems running, you reach a critical point. Your passive income exceeds your living expenses. That's financial freedom. That's when the paycheck becomes optional. Not because you're lazy, because you've built leverage. Real example. The duplex strategy. Let me give you the exact playbook I used. Step 1. Saved $40,000 while working my W-2 job. Took 3 years of disciplined saving. Step 2. Bought a duplex in a B-class neighborhood for $200,000. Put down $40,000. Step 3. Lived in one unit, house hacking. Rented out the other for $200 a month. Step 4. My mortgage, taxes, insurance, $400 a month. But because I lived there, my housing cost was effectively $200 a month, while $400 $200. Step 5. 2 years later, moved out. Rented my unit for $200 as well. Now I'm collecting $2,400 a month, paying $1,400 net cash flow, $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year from one property that I bought using the paycheck I was stuck with. 3 years later, I repeated the process. Then again. By year 10, I had 5 properties generating $60,000 annually in cash flow. My W-2 job, still there, but now it was optional. That's the shift. Chapter 6. Breaking Free, the Roadmap Out. So let's get practical. You're listening to this, maybe sitting in traffic on your way to a job that drains you. Maybe you're feeling that weight, the weight of obligations, debt, routine. How do you actually escape? Here's the roadmap. No fluff, no theory, just the steps. Step 1. Track everything for 30 days. You can't change what you don't understand. For the next 30 days, track every dollar, every coffee, every subscription, every impulse purchase. Use an app, use a spreadsheet. I don't care. Just track it. At the end of 30 days, you'll see patterns. You'll see where money is leaking. And more importantly, you'll see what you're actually valuing with your spending. Most people are shocked. They think they're disciplined until they see the numbers. Step 2. Eliminate the waste. Once you've tracked for 30 days, identify the small leaks. That 15-month subscription you forgot about, the $8 coffee 4 times a week, the 60-month gym membership you haven't used in 3 months. Cut it, all of it. I'm not saying live like a monk. I'm saying be intentional. Spend on what aligns with your goals. Cut everything else. Small leaks become large financial weaknesses over time. Plug them. Step 3. Automate your savings. Set up an automatic transfer. Every paycheck, 10-15% goes straight to a separate account immediately, before you see it. Make it invisible. Make it non-negotiable. This is the foundation. Everything builds from here. Step 4. Invest in knowledge. Here's what nobody tells you. The highest return investment you can make is yourself. Books, courses, mentorship, learning how real estate works, how the stock market operates, how taxes function. Every dollar spent on education returns 10, 20, 100 times over in decision-making quality. I spent $2,000 on a real estate course in 2009. That course taught me how to analyze deals, find properties, and structure financing. That knowledge has generated millions in equity and cash flow. The cost of ignorance is always higher than the cost of learning. Step 5. Build your first asset. Start small. Pick one. Open a brokerage account. Invest $100 a month in a low-cost index fund. Save for a down payment on a house hack, duplex, triplex. Create a digital product, template, guide, course, and sell it online. It doesn't matter which one. What matters is that you start. Because the moment you own an asset, something that works for you instead of you working for it, your identity shifts. You're no longer just an employee. You're a builder. Step 6. Scale what works. Once you've proven you can build one income stream, build another, then another. Diversify, layer, compound. This isn't a sprint. It's a decade-long process, but every year you'll feel lighter, freer, more in control. Chapter 7. The real goal. Time, freedom, and legacy. Let's talk about what this is actually for. Because here's the thing. Money is not the goal. It never was. The goal is freedom. Freedom is owning your time. It's having the ability to say no to what drains you and yes to what energizes you. It's waking up on a Tuesday and deciding to spend the day with your kids because you can. It's walking away from a toxic job without panic because your bills are covered by systems you built years ago. It's having options. Time is the true currency. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. Every hour you trade for a paycheck is an hour you'll never get back. And most people don't realize this until they're 60 and looking back, wondering where it all went. The 1% understand this early. They use money to buy back time. They automate. They outsource. They build systems that run without them. Not because they're lazy, because time with family, time for health, time for purpose, that's the real wealth. Purpose-driven wealth. Here's the paradox. The people who chase money rarely get it. The people who focus on creating value and solving problems. Money follows them naturally. Because money is just a response to value creation. When you shift your focus from how do I get rich to how do I serve at the highest level, everything changes. You stop chasing, you start attracting, and the wealth you build feels meaningful because it's connected to something bigger than just a number in an account. Building a legacy. Final. Thought, think generationally. Most people think about wealth in terms of their lifetime. Save enough to retire, maybe leave a little something behind. But the 1%? They think in generations. They build systems that outlast them. They transfer not just money, but mindset. Because the greatest gift you can leave isn't an inheritance. It's a framework, a way of thinking, a set of principles that empowers the next generation to build their own wealth. That's legacy. Chapter 8. The hidden tax nobody talks about. Inflation is stealing your future. You know what keeps me up at night? Not market crashes, not recessions. Those are predictable. Those have patterns. What bothers me is watching people work their entire lives, doing everything right and still losing ground every single year. And they have no idea it's happening. Let me show you something that changed how I see money forever. The erosion. You can't see your salary is $65,000. Last year it was $63,000. You got a 3% raise. Congratulations. Your boss probably told you that you earned it. Maybe you felt good about it for a week. But here's what they didn't tell you. Inflation last year was 3.7%. You didn't get a raise, you got a pay cut, and you celebrated it. That's the hidden tax. Inflation. It's silent, it's constant, and it's brutal for anyone sitting on cash. I watched this play out with my neighbor Frank, retired school teacher, and worked 35 years, built up $400,000 in savings, thought he was set, kept everything in a savings account earning 0.5% interest because it felt safe. 10 years later, that $400,000 has the purchasing power of about $290,000. He didn't spend recklessly. He didn't lose it in a scam. Inflation just ate it. While he was being conservative, his wealth was being systematically destroyed. The cash trap. Here's what most people don't understand. Holding cash feels safe, but it's one of the riskiest long-term positions you can take. Because every year, your dollars are worth less. Every year, the cost of housing, healthcare, food, everything goes up. And if your wealth isn't growing faster than inflation, you're moving backward. The 1% know this. That's why they keep minimal cash, just enough for emergencies and opportunities. Everything else? Invested in assets that outpace inflation, real estate, stocks, businesses, things that grow in value while cash deteriorates. Let me give you the math on this. $100,000 sitting in a savings account at 0.5% interest with 3.5% inflation, year 10, purchasing power. 70 $192, year 20, purchasing power. 52.50 senedeferen, year 30, purchasing power. Year 35 628. You literally lose 2/3 of your wealth by doing the safe thing. Now, take that same $100,000 and invest it in an S&P 500 index fund, averaging 10% annual returns. Year 10, 259.34, year 20, 6.2, year 30, 40 same starting point, completely different outcomes, fighting back with appreciating assets. So how do you win against inflation? Simple. You stop holding cash and start holding value. Value doesn't erode. A share of a productive company, a rental property in a growing market, a skill that solves expensive problems. These things maintain or increase their worth over time. I'll give you a personal example. In 2012, I bought a small rental property for $85,000. Average area, nothing fancy. Rented it for $850 a month. Today, that property is worth $165,000 and the rent, $2,400 a month. I didn't do anything special. I just owned an appreciating asset while inflation did its thing. The debt I owed got cheaper in real terms every year. The rent increased with inflation. The property value compounded. That's how you beat the hidden tax. You don't fight it. You use it. The wage stagnation reality. But here's where it gets even uglier. Real wages, adjusted for inflation, have been basically flat for 40 years. The median worker today has roughly the same purchasing power as their counterpart in 1980. Think about that. 4 decades of technological progress, 4 decades of productivity gains, and the average worker is standing still. Meanwhile, asset prices have exploded. A house that cost $50,000 in 1980 now costs $350,000. College tuition has increased 1 in 200. Healthcare costs have tripled. So if you're only earning a paycheck, you're playing a game where the goalposts move further away every single year. The 1% aren't smarter. They just refuse to play that game. They build assets that capture those price increases instead of being victimized by them. Does that sound familiar? That feeling of working harder every year but somehow falling further behind? That's not your imagination. That's math. That's the system working exactly as designed. And the only way out is to stop being purely a wage earner and start being an asset owner. Chapter 9. The Leverage Game. How the Wealthy Multiply Effort. Let me tell you about the moment I finally understood how the rich actually get rich. I was 28, working 60-hour weeks, making decent money, about $80,000 a year. I was proud of myself. I was outworking everyone around me. And then I met Richard. Richard owned a small property management company. He wasn't working 60 hours. He was working maybe 20, but he was pulling in $300,000 a year. I remember asking him, how? And he said something I'll never forget. I stopped trading my time for money. I started trading systems for money. That was my introduction to leverage. The 4 types of leverage. There are 4 ways to multiply your results beyond your personal effort. The 1% use all four. Most people use none. 1. Labor leverage. This is hiring people to execute your vision. You design the system, they operate it. Richard had 12 employees managing 140 rental units. He wasn't collecting rent checks. He wasn't fixing toilets. He was building relationships with property owners and making strategic decisions. His time was spent on high-value activities. Everything else was delegated. That's labor leverage. Your income becomes decoupled from your hours. 2. Capital leverage. This is using other people's money to acquire assets that generate returns. When I bought that duplex for $200,000, I only put down $40,000. The bank provided the other $160,000, but I own the asset. I get the appreciation, I collect the cash flow. Over 10 years, that property gained $120,000 in equity. I made 300% returns on my $40,000 investment because I used the bank's capital as leverage. Most people are terrified of debt. The 1% understand that smart debt used to acquire appreciating assets, is a wealth accelerator. 3. Technology leverage. This is building systems that scale without human intervention. I know a guy who created a budgeting spreadsheet template, spent 40 hours building it. Now he sells it online for $29. No inventory, no shipping, no customer service calls. Last year, $180,000 in revenue from 40 hours of work done 5 years ago. That's technology leverage. Code, software, digital products. They work 24/7 without needing a salary. 4. Knowledge leverage. This is the most powerful form. It's understanding what others don't. When I learned how to analyze rental property cash flow, cap rates, cash-on-cash returns, debt service coverage ratios, I could look at a property and know within 5 minutes if it was a good deal. That knowledge has made me millions because I see opportunities where others see risk. Knowledge is the leverage that unlocks every other form of leverage. The time trap versus the leverage trap. Here's the fundamental difference between employees and investors. Employees are stuck in the time trap. Their income is directly tied to hours worked. More income requires more hours. There's a ceiling. But investors use the leverage trap, except it's not actually a trap. It's a multiplier. They build something once and get paid repeatedly. They invest capital and let it compound. They hire talent and scale operations. They learn principles and apply them across multiple ventures. Linear effort, exponential returns. That's the game the 1% are playing. And until you understand leverage, you're not even on the field. Starting with what you have. I know what you're thinking. I don't have employees. I don't have capital. I can't build software. Fair. But you have something. You have knowledge you can package. You have time you can redirect. You have credit you can responsibly leverage. Start with one form of leverage. Master it, then add another. I started with capital leverage, used financing to buy my first property. Then I added knowledge leverage, learned property management inside and out. Then labor leverage, hired a property manager to handle operations, layer by layer, year by year. That's how you sue. Escape the time trap. That's how you multiply yourself. Chapter 10. The debt conversation. Nobody wants to have good debt versus financial cancer. We need to talk about debt because the advice you've been given your entire life, debt is bad, pay it off, avoid it at all costs, is only half true. And that missing half is costing you a fortune. The debt that destroys. Let's start with the obvious. There's debt that will ruin your life. Credit card debt at 22% interest to buy things that lose value the moment you swipe the card. Car loans at 7% for a $45,000 vehicle that'll be worth $30,000 in 3 years. Personal loans to fund vacations or weddings. This is what I call financial cancer. It metastasizes, it spreads, it consumes everything. Because here's the math. If you're carrying $15,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest and only making minimum payments, you'll pay over $40,000 and it'll take you 30 years to clear it. 30 years. Paying for purchases you don't even remember making. That's not debt, that's a cage. And I'll be blunt. If you have this kind of debt, nothing else matters. Not investing, not real estate, not building businesses. Your only priority is killing this debt as fast as humanly possible. Because you cannot build wealth while financial cancer is eating your cash flow. The debt that builds. Now, here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. There's debt that creates wealth. I'm talking about debt used to acquire appreciating assets that generate cash flow exceeding the debt service. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. I bought a triplex for $280, put down $56,000, 20%, financed 224s at 4% interest. My mortgage payment is $135 a month. I rent out all 3 units. Total rental income, $3,300 a month. After mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and vacancy reserves, I net about $200 a month in cash flow. That's $14,400 a year from debt. But here's where it gets really interesting. That $224,000 loan, my tenants are paying it down. Every month, about $400 of principal gets paid off. That's $4,800 a year in forced equity building. So I'm getting $14,400 in cash flow plus $4,800 in equity paydown plus appreciation. Property values in that area have been rising 3% annually, another $8,400 a year. Total annual return, $27,600 on a $56,000 investment. That's a 49% annual return because I use debt as a tool. The critical distinction. So what's the difference between good debt and bad debt? Simple test. Does this debt acquire an asset that appreciates in value over time and generates income exceeding the debt payment? If yes, good debt. Use it strategically. If no, bad debt. Avoid it or eliminate it immediately. A mortgage on a rental property that cash flows? Good debt. A mortgage on an oversized house you can barely afford? Bad debt. A business loan to purchase equipment that doubles your production capacity? Good debt. A personal loan to buy a jet ski? Bad debt. It's not complicated. But most people never make this distinction. They treat all debt as evil or all debt as acceptable. The 1% are surgical. They use debt as leverage when the numbers make sense. They avoid it everywhere else. The velocity of money. Here's another concept that changed everything for me. Velocity. When you pay all cash for a $200,000 rental property, your $200,000 is locked in that one asset. You own it free and clear. No debt, feels safe. But when you use financing, say 20% down on 5 properties instead of 1, that same $200,000 is now controlling $1,000 in real estate. Same capital. 5 times the exposure, 5 times the appreciation, 5 times the cash flow. That's velocity. That's using leverage to do more with the same amount of money. Obviously, there's more risk, more complexity, more management, but the potential? Exponentially higher. This is why the wealthy use debt, not because they're reckless, because they understand that responsibly leveraged capital compounds faster than unleveraged capital. Your debt audit. So here's your homework. List every debt you have: credit cards, car loans, student loans, mortgages, personal loans. Next to each one, write interest rate. What the debt was used for. Whether that purchase is making you money or costing you money. Anything that's costing you money, attack it. Highest interest rate first. Throw every extra dollar at it until it's gone. Anything that's making you money? Keep it. Manage it. Make sure the returns exceed the cost. This is debt intelligence, and it's non-negotiable if you want to build real wealth. Chapter 11. The value creation. Mindset. Why your income is capped and how to break through. I need to tell you something that might sting. If you're trading time for money, your income has a ceiling. And you've probably already hit it. Maybe you make $50,000 a year, maybe $100,000, maybe even $200,000 if you're in a specialized field. But here's the thing. There are only so many hours you can work, only so much you can charge per hour, only so far a salary can go. That's the cap. And most people spend their entire careers bumping their head against it, wondering why they can't break through. The shift from time to value. The breakthrough happens when you stop thinking in terms of hours and start thinking in terms of value creation. Let me explain. When you're an employee, you're paid for effort. You show up for 8 hours, you get paid for 8 hours. Doesn't matter if you solved $1 million problem or spent the day in pointless meetings. Your compensation is tied to input, not output. But when you shift to value creation, everything changes. You're no longer paid for time, you're paid for results. A freelance consultant doesn't charge by the hour. She charges $15,000 to solve a specific problem. And if she's efficient, she might solve it in 10 hours. That's 1/500 hour. A software developer builds an app that saves a company $200,000 annually. He gets a piece of that savings, not because he worked a certain number of hours, but because he created value. A real estate investor finds an off-market property, negotiates a below-market purchase, renovates strategically, and creates $80,000 in forced equity. That's value creation. That's income decoupled from time. See the pattern? The market pays for problems solved. Here's the formula. The bigger the problem you solve, the more you get paid. Nobody's going to pay you $10,000 to do something they could easily do themselves, but they'll pay you $50,000 to solve a problem that's costing them $500,000. The 1% are obsessed with identifying expensive problems and building solutions. What's costing businesses in your industry the most money? Inefficiency, compliance issues, customer acquisition? What's costing individuals the most stress? Time management, health problems, financial confusion? Find the pain point, build the solution, charge based on the value you create. That's how you break the income ceiling, scaling value creation. But here's where it gets really powerful. When you package your value creation into a system, you can scale it infinitely. A consultant solves one client's problem at a time. That's linear, still capped by time. But a consultant who turns his methodology into an online course, now he's solving that problem for thousands of people simultaneously. Same knowledge, infinite scale. A landlord who owns one property creates value for one tenant. But a landlord who owns 50 properties and systematizes operations with a property manager? That's scaled value creation. You leverage technology, systems, and other people to multiply the value you create without multiplying the time you spend. From employee to problem solver. So if you're currently an employee, here's the question you need to ask. What problem am I solving at my company that I could solve independently for multiple clients or customers? Maybe you're in marketing and you know how to run profitable ad campaigns. That's a $5,000-month service to small businesses. Maybe you're in operations and you've figured out how to streamline inventory management. That's consulting work at $200 an hour. Maybe you're in design and you've created templates that save hours of work. That's a digital product you could sell for $50 each. The skills you're using to make your boss wealthy? Those same skills can make you wealthy if you redirect them toward value creation instead of time trading. This isn't about quitting your job tomorrow. It's about shifting how you see yourself, from employee to problem solver, from time trader to value creator. That shift? That's where the ceiling breaks. Chapter 12. The Network Effect. Why who you know compounds faster than what you know. 10 years ago, I almost walked away from a networking event. I was tired. I didn't want to make small talk. I wanted to go home and watch basketball. But I stayed. And I ended up talking to a guy named Mike for 20 minutes. He was a commercial real estate broker. We exchanged numbers, didn't think much of it. 6 months later, Mike called me about an off-market fourplex. Owner was relocating, needed to sell fast, willing to go below appraised value. I bought it, made $60,000 in equity on day one. Cash flowed $18,000 a year. That 20-minute conversation turned into $250,000 in wealth over the next decade. That's the network effect. Your network is your net worth. I know that sounds like a LinkedIn motivational post, but it's literally true. The opportunities that change your life don't come from job boards or classified ads. They come from people, the private deal flow, the insider knowledge, the strategic partnership, the referral to the right person at the right time. This stuff doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through relationships. And here's what most people miss. Building a valuable network isn't about collecting contacts. It's about creating value for others first. The give first strategy. When I meet someone new, especially someone I respect or want to learn from, I ask myself, how can I help this person? Not, what can I get from them? That's amateur hour. That's transparent. That's why most networking feels gross. But when you lead with generosity, when you make an introduction that helps someone, when you share knowledge or resources without expecting anything back, people remember that, and they reciprocate, often in ways you couldn't have predicted. I introduced Mike to a property owner who needed management services. Cost me nothing. Earned Mike a $50,000-year management contract. 2 years later, Mike brought me the best deal of my career, a portfolio of 3 properties at 15% below market value. I didn't network my way into that deal. I earned it by adding value first. Proximity to success. Here's another truth. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you're surrounded by people who complain about money, who think investing is risky, who believe the system is rigged, guess what? You'll internalize those beliefs. But if you're around people who are building businesses, acquiring assets, thinking strategically, you'll absorb that too. Proximity matters. Not because you're copying people, because you're normalizing what's possible. When everyone around you has a W-2 job and a car payment, that's normal. That's the baseline. But when you're around people who own rental properties, who have side businesses, who think in terms of leverage and equity, that becomes normal. Your standards rise, your actions follow. Building your circle strategically. So how do you actually build a high-quality network? 3 steps. 1. Audit your current circle list, the 10 people you spend the most time with. For each person, ask, are they where I want to be financially? Do they challenge me to grow? Do they support my goals or subtly undermine them? This isn't about being ruthless. It's about being honest. Some relationships need to be reduced in frequency if they're holding you back. 2. Get in the room. Join communities where your future self already exists. Real estate investment groups, entrepreneurship meetups, online masterminds. Yes, it's uncomfortable at first. You'll be the least experienced person there. Good. That's how you grow. I joined a local real estate investor group when I owned 0 properties. Everyone else had portfolios. I felt completely out of place. But I showed up every month. I asked questions. I helped where I could. Within a year, I had 3 mentors, 2 joint venture partners, and access to deals I never would have found on my own. 3. Provide value consistently. Don't just take, contribute, share what you learn, make introductions, solve small problems, be someone people want in their network because you make things better. That's how you go from outsider to insider, not by forcing it, by earning it. Chapter 13, The Long Game, Why Patience is the Ultimate Competitive Advantage. March 2020. The market crashes. My portfolio drops 28% in 3 weeks. I get a call from a friend. Let's call him Jason. He's panicking. He sold everything, moved to cash. Better safe than sorry, he says. I didn't sell, I held. And actually, I bought more. Fast forward 18 months, the market fully recovered, then kept climbing. My portfolio not only came back, it hit new highs. Jason? He never got back in. Too scared. Missed the entire recovery. Same event, 2 completely different outcomes. Why? Because I was playing a different game. I was playing the long game. The impatience tax. Here's what I've learned. Impatience is expensive. People who chase quick wins, who jump from strategy to strategy, who can't stomach short-term volatility, they pay a massive tax. They sell low and buy high. They abandon strategies before they compound. They miss the entire point of investing. Because real wealth isn't built in months, it's built in decades. That S&P 500 fund I keep mentioning, over any 1-year period, it's unpredictable. Could be up 30%, could be down 20%, but over any 20-year period, it's never been negative. Average return, about 10% annually. The people who win are the people who can wait. Compounding requires time. Let me show you something wild. If you invest $10,000 and it grows at 10% annually, year 1, $11,000, gained $1,000. Year 10, $25,937, gained $15,937 total. Year 20, $67,255, gained $57,255 total. Year 30, $1,444, gained $164,94 total. Look at that progression. The first 10 years, you make $15,937, but years 20 to 30, the same 10-year period, you make $107,219. The majority of your wealth happens in the later years because compounding is exponential, not linear. But you only get there if you stay in the game. Most people quit in year 5, or they panic in year 8 during a downturn. They never see years 20, 30. That's the impatience tax. Think in decades. Act today. Here's the paradox. You need to think long-term, but act immediately. Because every year you delay is a year of compounding lost. Forever. If you're 30 years old and you start investing $500 a month at 10% returns, by age 65, you'll have $1.9 million. But if you wait until you're 40 to start, same $500 a month, you'll have $680,000. 1 decade of delay cost you $1.2 million. Time is the most powerful force in wealth building, but only if you use it. So the move isn't to wait until you're ready, or until you have more money, or until the market is better. The move is to start now with what you have and let time do the heavy lifting. The discipline to do nothing. Warren Buffett has this quote, "The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient." He's right. The hardest thing in investing isn't finding good opportunities. It's having the discipline to hold them while everyone around you is freaking out. Every correction, every crash. The patient investors who held through it are now wealthy. The impatient ones who sold are still trying to time their way back in. Patience isn't passive, it's active discipline. It's controlling your emotions when your brain is screaming at you to do something. It's the ability to say, I trust the process, I trust the math, I'm not reacting to noise. That's the ultimate competitive advantage because most people can't do it, which means if you can, you win by default. Chapter 14, the pivot point, recognizing when it's time to make the leap. All right, real talk. At some point in this journey, you're going to face a decision, a pivot point. Maybe it's the moment your side hustle income matches your W-2 income. Maybe it's when your rental cash flow covers your living expenses. Maybe it's when you realize you've learned everything you can from your current job and staying feels like moving backward. That's the pivot point. And how you handle it determines everything. The fear that keeps you stuck. I've watched hundreds of people reach this moment, and most of them freeze. They've built something real, something with momentum. But they can't pull the trigger. They can't leave the safety of the paycheck. Why? Fear. Specifically, the fear of losing what they have. They think, what if the business fails? What if the market crashes? What if I can't find another job? And so they stay. They keep the W-2. They try to do both. And slowly, the side thing, the thing with real potential, dies from lack of attention. I get it. I've been there. In 2015, I had 4 rental properties generating $40,000 a year in cash flow. My day job was paying $95,000. I was working 80-hour weeks trying to manage both. I was exhausted, burned out, stuck between 2 worlds, and I had to make a choice. The risk calculus. Here's what helped me decide. I asked myself, what's the worst-case scenario? If I left my job and focused entirely on real estate, what's the worst that could happen? Real answer. I'd have to sell a property or 2 if cash flow wasn't enough. Maybe I'd have to take a consulting gig for 6 months. Maybe I'd end up back in a W-2 role. In other words, survivable, reversible, not catastrophic. Then I asked, what's the best-case scenario? I'd build a portfolio generating 6 figures in passive income. I'd have complete control over my time. I'd create a life where I work because I want to, not because I have to. Risk, temporary setback, reward, permanent freedom. When you frame it that way, the decision becomes obvious. The safety net strategy. But I didn't just leap blindly. I built a safety net. Before I left my W-2, I made sure I had 12 months of living expenses in cash. My rental income covered 75% of my baseline expenses. I had 2 potential consulting clients lined up as backup. I owned my car outright, no payment. I had 0 consumer debt. That's not reckless, that's prepared. Too many people think entrepreneurship is about taking huge, irresponsible risks. It's not. It's about taking calculated risks with contingency plans. The 1% aren't gamblers, they're strategists. Recognizing your moment. So how do you know when it's your pivot point? 3 signs. 1. Your side thing requires more attention than you can give. If you're constantly turning down opportunities because you don't have time, that's a sign you're leaving money on the table. 2. Your day job is actively draining you. Not just, I don't love Mondays, I mean deep soul-crushing drain. If the cost to your health and sanity is outweighing the paycheck, it's time. 3. Your safety net is built. If you've got 6 to 12 months of expenses saved and your alternative income is real, not theoretical, you're ready. You don't need to be 100% certain, you just need to be more excited about the opportunity than you are afraid of the risk. The leap I made. In June 2015, I handed in my resignation. It was terrifying. I'd been employed my entire adult life. The security of that bi-weekly deposit was deeply ingrained, but I knew I'd regret not trying more than I'd regret trying and failing. First year, I made $62,000 from rentals and consulting, less than my W-2, but I worked 30 hours a week instead of 60. Second year, $98,000. Bought 2 more properties. Third year, $140,000, and I had time to coach my kids' soccer team, time to travel, time to live. That pivot, best decision I ever made. Not because it was easy, because it was right. Chapter 15. The life you're actually building, beyond the money. We need to talk about what happens after. After you've built the cash flow, after you've escaped the paycheck, after you've reached financial independence, because here's what nobody tells you. Money solves money problems. It doesn't solve life problems. And if you're not careful, you'll spend 20 years building wealth only to realize you don't know what it's actually for. The emptiness at the top. I know a guy, very successful investor, built a $12 million portfolio by age 45, fully passive, doesn't have to work another day in his life, and he's miserable. Because he spent 20 years so focused on the accumulation that he never thought about the purpose. Now he wakes up every day with infinite options and zero direction. No mission, no meaning, just time. That's the trap people don't see coming. Money is a tool. But if you don't know what you're building the tool for, you end up with a fancy hammer and nothing to build. Redefining wealth. So let me ask you something. What does wealth actually mean to you? Not the generic answer, not freedom or security. Those are fine, but they're vague. I mean, specifically, if money was no longer a constraint, how would you spend your Tuesday afternoon? Would you be creating something, teaching someone, exploring, resting, serving? That's what you're building toward. That's the real goal. For me, it's time with my family without distraction. It's the ability to take on projects that matter to me without worrying about the paycheck. It's mentoring younger investors who remind me of myself 15 years ago. That's wealth, not the number in the account, the life the number enables. The legacy. Question. Here's another one. What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? He had a big portfolio? Doubt it. More likely. He was present. He was generous. He taught me how to think differently about money. The wealth you're building, it's ultimately not for you. It's for the impact you can make, the people you can help, the example you can set. My kids are watching how I handle money, how I make decisions, whether I'm controlled by scarcity or guided by abundance. That's the real inheritance, not the assets, the mindset. Freedom with direction. So here's my challenge to you as you build wealth. Define your enough. How much passive income do you actually need to live the life you want? Not the life Instagram says you should want, your life. For some people, that's $5,000 a month. For others, it's $50,000 a month. There's no right answer. But once you define it, you have a target, a finish line, a moment where you can shift from accumulation to allocation, from building wealth to deploying it toward what matters most. That's freedom with direction. That's wealth with purpose. And that's what separates the people who get rich and stay miserable from the people who get rich and actually live. The ripple effect. Last thing. The work you're doing, breaking free from the paycheck addiction, building assets, learning financial discipline, it doesn't just change your life. It changes everyone connected to you. Your kids learn that wealth is possible. Your friends start asking questions, start thinking differently. Your community sees a different model. You become proof that the system isn't fixed, that the paycheck isn't the only path. that another way exists. That ripple, that's legacy. That's what you're actually building. Final call to action. Your next move starts now. All right, we're here. You've absorbed the principles. You've seen the math. You understand the shift from employee to investor, from time trading to value creating, from paycheck dependence to system-based freedom. Now comes the part that matters most: action. Because everything we've talked about means nothing if it stays theoretical. If it stays as someday, or when I'm ready, or after I figure it out. Here's the truth. You're never going to feel ready. You're never going to have perfect clarity. You're never going to have all the information. But you can start. Today. Right now. The 72-hour window. There's this principle in behavioral psychology. If you don't take action on an idea within 72 hours, the odds of you ever taking action drop to less than 10%. 72 hours, that's the window. So I'm going to give you 3 specific actions. Pick one, not all 3, just one, and commit to completing it within the next 72 hours. Action 1, the financial clarity audit. Set a timer for 30 minutes. Pull up your bank statements from the last 3 months. Track every dollar, every subscription, every purchase. Categorize them: essential, growth investment, or waste. Calculate your real monthly burn rate, not what you think it is, what it actually is. Once you have that number, answer this. If I cut the waste and redirected it toward assets, what could I build in 12 months? That's clarity. That's the foundation for every decision going forward. Action 2. The first asset move. Open a brokerage account today. Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab. Doesn't matter which one. Transfer $100 or $500 or $1,000, whatever you can afford without causing stress. Buy one share of a low-cost index fund, VTI, VOO. Literally just pick one. You're not trying to get rich off this single purchase. You're trying to shift your identity from person who thinks about investing to person who owns assets. That shift, that's the crack in the wall. Action 3, the knowledge deep dive. Pick one topic related to wealth building, real estate investing, tax strategy, business formation, dividend investing, whatever pulls you. Buy one book. Read it in the next 2 weeks. Take notes. Apply one concept immediately. Then buy the next book, then the next. Knowledge is the leverage that unlocks everything else, and every dollar spent on education returns 10, 20, 100 times over in better decision-making. The compound effect of small wins. Here's why this matters. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates bigger action. You don't need to buy a rental property tomorrow. You don't need to quit your job next month. You just need to take one step that proves to yourself, I'm serious about this. I'm not just consuming content. I'm building. That one step leads to the next, and 12 months from now, you'll look back and barely recognize the person you were, not because of one massive leap, because of hundreds of small, consistent steps. The permission you're waiting for. I know some of you are still hesitating, still waiting for permission, still thinking, is this really for me? So let me be crystal clear. You don't need permission. You don't need credentials. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to start. The 1% aren't special. They're not smarter. They're not luckier. They just decided one day that the paycheck wasn't enough, that trading time for money wasn't the life they wanted, that financial freedom was worth the discomfort of learning something new. And they acted on that decision. Consistently. For years. That's it. That's the entire secret. You can do this, not because I'm saying it, because the math supports it, because thousands of people before you have done it, because the principles work if you apply them. The life waiting on the other side. 5 years from now, you're going to be somewhere. You'll either be 5 years deeper into the paycheck addiction, more tired, more stressed, more dependent, or you'll be 5 years into your freedom. Same 5 years. Completely different destinations. The difference? The decision you make in the next 72 hours. So here's my final question. What's the one thing you can do today that your future self will thank you for? Do that thing. Then do the next thing. And keep going. Conclusion. Welcome to the other side. If you've made it this far, you're not the same person who started this audiobook. Something's shifted. Maybe it's subtle, maybe it's seismic, but you're seeing the game differently now. You understand that the safe job isn't safe, that the paycheck is a starting point, not a destination. That real wealth comes from building systems, acquiring assets, and thinking like an investor instead of an employee. More importantly, you understand that this isn't about getting rich quick. It's about building sustainable freedom over time through discipline, clarity, and consistent action. The paycheck addiction is real, and it's powerful, because it's comfortable, because it's predictable, because everyone around you validates it as the right path. But you know better now. You know that comfort without freedom is just a comfortable cage, that predictability without growth is stagnation, that the right path for everyone else might be the wrong path for you. And that's okay, because you're choosing differently. You're choosing to build, to invest, to create value, to own your time, to think generationally. You're choosing the long game, the hard game, the game that compounds. And 5 years from now, hell, maybe 2 years from now, you're going to look back at this moment as the turning point, the moment you stopped being an employee and started being an investor, the moment you stopped trading time for money and started building systems, the moment you stopped hoping for freedom and started creating it. This is your life, your one shot, your finite number of hours on this planet. Don't spend them making someone else wealthy while you stay dependent. Build something. Own something. Create something that outlasts you. That's the shift. That's the journey. That's the life you're building. Welcome to the other side. Now, go build.